An Instagram influencer found dead in a suitcase in the hallway of her own building. The killer confessed on video. They gave him 9 years, the largest black market in history, $1.7 billion in a single year, 17 million users, all run out of Russia. And the man who created the app that promised total freedom is now facing criminal charges in 2 countries for what that freedom allowed. This is the dark side of Russia's internet, Volume 2. The last photo Katerina posted on Instagram was from Corfu, her looking out at the Ionian Sea, the Greek sun, a smile. She wrote, "I like to travel often, but in each country I stay no more than 3 to 5 days. The impressions from those short trips are the most vivid." That photo was posted on July 22nd, 2019. That same day was the last time anyone saw her alive. If you watched the first video I made about this country, you already know that the dark side of the Russian internet is something completely different from what we see in the rest of the world. Today we have 3 new cases. 3 different angles of the same thing. A digital culture that can be as brilliant as it is brutal. We start with Katerina Karglinova. Katerina was born in 1994 in Russia. She was a doctor studying dermatology at one of Moscow's most prestigious universities, where she was completing her clinical residency. But what had made her well known wasn't her medical career. It was her Instagram. Her account was called Kati Loves Life, and the concept was simple and elegant. Katerina photographed herself at luxury destinations all across Europe, Venice, Dubai, Paris, Corfu, always in carefully chosen outfits, always with a very distinct aesthetic. She had decided to visually model herself after Audrey Hepburn. The black dresses, the classic accessories, the pose. A lot of people told her she looked just like her. "I've admired Audrey since school," she wrote in a 2017 post, "and people often tell me I look like her." She had over 85,000 followers. She had competed in several beauty pageants, including Miss Moscow. She was smart, independent, ambitious. She traveled alone. She was building her own life. And in the summer of 2019, she was about to celebrate her 25th birthday in the Netherlands with her new boyfriend. She never made it. On June 22nd, 2019, Katerina's parents spoke to her for the last time. Over the following days, they tried to reach her repeatedly. The phone went unanswered. No new posts on Instagram, no sign of life. At first they figured maybe she was just busy, working a lot. But the days went by and the silence kept getting heavier. Finally, her parents went to the apartment she was renting in a quiet neighborhood in Moscow near several embassies. They coordinated with the landlord to have the door opened. When the landlord opened the building door, what they found wasn't inside the apartment. It was in the hallway, a large suitcase, and sticking out of the suitcase were Katerina's legs. Investigators determined she had been killed on June 22nd itself, the last day her family had contact with her. The cause of death was multiple stab wounds, more than 19 knife wounds to the neck and chest. She had been undressed and stuffed into the suitcase. There were no signs of a struggle in the apartment. The weapon was never found. The building's security cameras had captured something important: a man entering Katerina's apartment in the days before her disappearance, and leaving hours later. Police identified him quickly. His name was Maxim Gureyev. He was 33 years old. Russian tabloids had nicknamed him Ken Doll because he had undergone multiple plastic surgery procedures trying to improve his appearance. And he had a relationship with Katerina, a relationship that by his own later description was completely one-sided. Gureyev was detained just a few days after the body was found, and he confessed. In a video published by the Investigative Committee of the Russian Federation, the country's equivalent of the FBI, Gureyev appeared on camera describing what he had done. His words were translated and published by outlets around the world. "She repeatedly insulted me. She humiliated me. She told me I was ugly and that not even plastic surgery could save me. She downplayed my financial situation and I couldn't take it anymore. I stabbed her at least 5 times in the neck and chest. And then, I regret it. I will cooperate with the investigation." What the confession video didn't explain was the full dynamic of the relationship between Gureyev and Katerina. According to what came out during the investigation, Gureyev gave Katerina money every time they saw each other. It wasn't a conventional romantic relationship, it was one where he paid to spend time with her. And he knew it. He accepted it. He kept doing it, until at some point she said something he couldn't handle. That he was ugly, that not even surgery would save him, that he'd need to save up for a long time before he could afford to see her again. Gureyev said the crime was spontaneous, that he hadn't planned it, that he just couldn't take it anymore. But something doesn't add up with that version. He showed up to the apartment with a knife. There were no signs of a struggle. He killed her, undressed her, stuffed her into a suitcase, and left. That's not the portrait of someone who snapped in a split second. That's the portrait of someone who made decisions, step by step, with enough composure to not leave any additional evidence behind. In court, Gureyev apologized to Katerina's parents. "I am ashamed of myself," he said in front of the cameras. Katerina's parents were sitting in the room. In March 2020, Maxim Gureyev was sentenced to 9 years in prison in a strict regime penal colony. He was also ordered to pay 2.5 million rubles, roughly $38,000 in compensation to the family. 9 years for killing a 24-year-old woman, for stabbing her more than 19 times, for stuffing her naked body into a suitcase in the hallway of her own building. 9 years. The case sparked a conversation that Russia normally avoids, because in Russia in 2019, there was no law that specifically defined domestic violence as a crime. According to official statistics from that year, there were over 33,000 registered domestic violence crimes, 24,400 of them against women. And those were just the reported cases. Russian activists had been pushing for a domestic violence law for years. The government had repeatedly shot it down, arguing it was a private family matter. When Gureyev was sentenced to 9 years, a punishment many considered scandalously light for such a brutal crime, the voices calling for legal reform got louder, but the system didn't change. There's something about this case that goes beyond the individual crime. Instagram was the stage where Katerina built her public life. Her photos in Corfu, in Venice, in Dubai were genuine. They were a reflection of a woman who had decided to live life on her own terms. Travel alone, build an audience, be independent. And that same visibility was exactly what Gureyev used to get close to her. He found her on social media. He reached out. He built a relationship based on money he offered and attention he expected to get in return. When that unspoken transaction didn't give him what he wanted, when she rejected him, when she humiliated him, he responded in the most brutal way possible. The last post on Kari Loves Life is still up on Instagram today. Over 100,000 followers. The Corfu Sea, Katerina's smile, and in the comments, messages from people who still don't know. She died less than 2 weeks after that photo was taken. Katerina Karglanova was 24 years old. She was about to turn 25 on July 30th. She had a trip booked to the Netherlands to celebrate. Her Instagram is still a window into the life of a woman who loved to travel, who admired Audrey Hepburn, who was building a medical career and a digital presence at the same time. A woman who was found in a suitcase in the hallway of her own building because a man couldn't accept that she had rejected him. Our next case is on a completely different scale. We're no longer talking about one person. We're talking about a platform that moved over $1.3 billion in cryptocurrency, had 17 million users, and dominated the global digital black market for years, all run out of Russia. I'm talking about Hydra. In the previous case, we talked about a woman whose public life lived on Instagram, and whose death came from someone who used that same visibility to get close to her. One person, one crime, one killer. Our next case operates on a completely different scale. We're not talking about one person. We're talking about a platform that had 17 million users, 19,000 registered sellers, and in a single year moved over $1.3 billion in cryptocurrency. If you watch the first video in this series, you're already familiar with the Kladman system, those young guys who act as delivery runners for the Russian black market, hiding packages in lampposts, parks, and city walls for buyers to pick up without any direct contact. That system wasn't invented by the markets we mentioned before. It was Hydra that perfected it, that scaled it, that turned it into the operating model for Russian organized digital crime. To understand what Hydra was, you first have to understand what the dark web looked like in 2015. In 2015, the most famous dark web marketplace in the world, Silk Road, had already been shut down by the FBI 2 years earlier. Its founder, Ross Ulbricht, was in prison. The void left by Silk Road spawned dozens of new markets, all trying to take its place. Most of them were Western, operated in English, and sooner or later got taken down by authorities. And then, out of Russia, came Hydra. Hydra launched in 2015 as a Russian language marketplace, designed specifically for users in Russia and the former Soviet Union countries. From the very beginning, it was different from everything else out there. It wasn't just a place to buy illegal products. It was a full-blown ecosystem, with an infrastructure so sophisticated that the cybersecurity experts who analyzed it described the experience as comparable to Amazon or eBay. And that comparison wasn't an exaggeration. Hydra had a seller review system, just like Amazon. If a seller had bad ratings, buyers knew before making a transaction. If a Kladman didn't drop the package at the right location, he got a bad review. If a product wasn't what it claimed to be, the buyer could open a dispute. It had customer service, a conflict resolution system, an internal search engine that let you filter products by price, category, region, and seller rating. And it had something no other dark web marketplace had implemented at that scale: a Bitcoin bank mixer, a tool built directly into the platform that blended cryptocurrency transactions to make them practically impossible to trace. Every time someone bought something on Hydra, the financial trail was automatically wiped clean. That's what made it nearly impossible for authorities to know who was buying what for years. What was being sold on Hydra? Everything. Drugs of all kinds, cocaine, meth, LSD, heroin, opioids were the main product. Sellers included high-quality photos of their products, detailed descriptions of purity and origin, and even dosage tips. But Hydra wasn't just drugs. It also sold fake identity documents, passports, driver's licenses, residency papers, customized with the buyer's photos, stolen credit cards, hacked personal data, hacking services on demand, ransomware packaged and ready to deploy. And as you already saw in the previous video in this series, all the delivery logistics ran through the Cladman system. Young guys who hid packages at geolocated spots that the buyer received after paying. No direct contact, no visible human trail. The system was so efficient that roughly 86% of all illegal bitcoins received by Russian exchanges in 2019 passed through Hydra. 86%. Hydra's numbers are hard to wrap your head around. In 2016, its first full year of operation, it generated under $10 million in transactions. By 2020, that number had grown to over $1.3 billion in a single year. In total, between 2015 and its shutdown in 2022, Hydra is estimated to have processed over $5 billion in cryptocurrency. $5 billion. It had 17 million registered user accounts. To put that into perspective, that's more than the entire population of the Netherlands. More than Chile's. 17 million people who at some point opened an account on the largest black market in the world. And for 7 years, Russian authorities did nothing. That's one of the most disturbing parts of the Hydra story. While the FBI, the DEA, the IRS, and the US Department of the Treasury were following the money, while Germany's federal criminal police were building their case, Russian authorities looked the other way. That's not an unsupported accusation. It's a documented pattern. Hydra operated from servers inside Russia. Its administrators lived in Russia, and yet for 7 years, no Russian agency launched a serious investigation. Hydra's operators knew they were protected as long as they didn't touch Russian interests, as long as their victims were foreign, or as long as the money kept flowing without creating internal problems. It was the same pattern we saw with DarkSide and other Russian ransomware groups. Operate from Russia, don't attack Russia, and Russian authorities leave you alone. The investigation that ultimately shut Hydra down began in August 2021. It wasn't Russia who started it, it was Germany. Germany's Central Office for Combating Cybercrime, ZIT, began working alongside US authorities to track Hydra's servers, many of which were physically located on German soil. On April 5th, 2022, 2 months after Russia invaded Ukraine, the hammer dropped. Germany's federal criminal police executed the operation. Servers seized, platform taken offline, and a confiscation of 543 bitcoins, worth approximately $25 million at the time, pulled directly from Hydra's digital wallets. That same day, the US Department of the Treasury officially sanctioned Hydra and published over 100 cryptocurrency addresses linked to its operations. When users tried to access Hydra that day, they found a different screen than usual. A German government seizure banner that read, "The platform and its criminal content have been seized by the Federal Criminal Police Office on behalf of the General Prosecutor's Office. 7 years, $5 billion, 17 million users, gone in a day." But the story doesn't end there. Because Hydra was so big, so dominant, that shutting it down didn't kill the market, it just broke it apart. In the 5 months following Hydra's closure, at least 12 new Russian language markets popped up to fill the void. And according to blockchain researchers, those 12 markets combined processed 24% more volume in 5 months than Hydra had processed in the first 5 months of 2022, when it was still up and running. The void filled faster than it took to create it. And something else happened. Hydra's users migrated en masse to Telegram. The encrypted messaging app became the new home of the Russian black market. Less organized than Hydra, more chaotic, but just as active. Which brings us directly to our third case, because there's one person in particular who made it possible for Telegram to become what it is today, someone who built a platform promising total freedom of expression and communication, and watched as that same freedom was taken advantage of by organized crime, traffickers, terrorists, and networks of every kind. A man who fled Russia in 2014, built one of the most widely used apps in the world, was arrested in France in 2024, and in 2026 is facing criminal charges in Russia for facilitating terrorism. I'm talking about Pavel Durov and Telegram. In the previous case, we saw how shutting down Hydra didn't wipe out the Russian black market. It just moved it. And where it largely went was Telegram. But to understand how Telegram became what it is today, the go-to platform for organized crime, traffickers, extremist groups, and intelligence services from all over the world, you have to understand who created it and why. Because Pavel Durov's story is, in many ways, the story of the internet itself, a promise of freedom that nobody ever fully managed to control. Pavel Durov was born in 1984 in St. Petersburg, Russia. From a young age, he was a prodigy. He studied philology at St. Petersburg State University, was multilingual, disciplined, and obsessive about technology. In 2006, when he was 22, he co-founded VKontakte, known as VK, along with his brother Nikolai. The concept was simple, a social network for Russian university students. Basically, the Russian Facebook. And it worked. Within a few years, VKontakte had become the largest social network in Eastern Europe, with hundreds of millions of users. Durov was young, rich, eccentric, and famous. He was photographed throwing bills out of his office window. He described himself as a libertarian entrepreneur. He was the most visible face of Russian tech. And then he started having problems with the Kremlin. In 2011 and 2012, Russia was rocked by massive protests against Vladimir Putin. Tens of thousands of people took to the streets of Moscow. Many of those protests were organized through VKontakte. Russian authorities demanded that Durov shut down the opposition group pages on the platform, that he hand over the personal data of users who were participating in the demonstrations, and that he cooperate with the FSB, Russia's intelligence service, the successor to the KGB. Durov refused, or at least he held out for as long as he could. In 2013, under enormous pressure, he sold his stake in VKontakte to investors with ties to the Kremlin. In 2014, after authorities demanded he hand over data on Ukrainian users who were participating in the Euromaidan protests, the revolution that ended up ousting Ukraine's pro-Russian president, Durov left the country. He left Russia with his brother, a few close collaborators, and an idea for a new project. That project was Telegram. Telegram launched in 2013, while Durov was still in Russia, as a messaging app with end-to-end encryption. The pitch was clear and straightforward. Total privacy. Your messages are yours. Nobody can read them. Not governments, not corporations, not us. It was the exact opposite of what Durov had experienced with VKontakte. The app grew slowly at first, but it kept picking up users in specific contexts. Activists in authoritarian countries, journalists in conflict zones, people who wanted to communicate without being watched. In Iran, in Hong Kong, in Belarus, in Venezuela, anywhere a government was trying to control communications, Telegram became the tool of resistance. By 2024, Telegram had nearly 1 billion active users worldwide. It was the 5th most downloaded app on the planet. And it was also, according to multiple investigations, the go-to platform for global organized crime. The problem with total freedom is that it applies to everyone. If Telegram can't read your messages, it also can't read the drug trafficker's messages as he coordinates his deliveries through the app. If Telegram doesn't hand data over to authoritarian governments, it also doesn't hand it over to prosecutors investigating child abuse networks. If anyone can create a channel with hundreds of thousands of followers without any identity verification, that works just as well for an activist in Belarus as it does for a terrorist group anywhere in the world. And so, little by little, Telegram became both things at the same time. On one hand, a genuinely important tool for press freedom and political dissent. On the other, what the organization Hope Not Hate described as the largest repository of anti-Semitic and far-right extremist content in the world. As we saw in the previous case, when Hydra shut down, its users migrated to Telegram. Drug trafficking groups, fake document markets, extortion networks, everything found a comfortable, encrypted, unmoderated home on Telegram. According to Russian authorities themselves, who are not exactly a neutral source since 2022, Telegram was used in over 153,000 crimes, including 33,000 cases of sabotage, terrorism, and extremism. On August 24, 2024, Pavel Durov landed at Le Bourget Airport in Paris. They arrested him on the tarmac. French authorities had issued an arrest warrant back in February of that year, after months of investigation. Charges were filed 4 days after the arrest, 12 counts in total, including complicity in the distribution of child sexual abuse material, drug trafficking, money laundering, and fraud. The accusation wasn't that Durov had committed those crimes directly. It was that Telegram, under his leadership, had facilitated those crimes by systematically refusing to cooperate with judicial authorities, by failing to moderate illegal content, and by providing an infrastructure that made it practically impossible to track down criminals. It was the first time in history that the CEO of a tech platform had been arrested specifically for his app's moderation failures. The reaction was immediate and all over the place. Free speech advocates said the arrest set a dangerous precedent that if governments could arrest platform founders for content their users posted, the result would be a hyper-censored internet where no app would dare protect its users' privacy. Authoritarian governments, including Iran and several Gulf states, quietly applauded. If Telegram was forced to cooperate with authorities, their own dissidents and activists would become a lot more vulnerable. And Russia had the most ironic reaction of all. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov came out publicly to express concern for Durov's well-being. Russia, the same country that had forced him into exile 10 years earlier, that had tried to block Telegram in 2018, that had spent years pressuring for access to its users' data, was now presenting itself as his defender. "We consider him a Russian citizen and are ready to provide assistance," Peskov said. The calculation was transparent. If Durov cooperated with France and the West, Telegram would become less useful for Russian organized crime and more useful for Western intelligence services. That wasn't in Russia's interest. Durov was released on bail in September 2024. He was banned from leaving France. The investigation continued. In the months that followed, something changed at Telegram. In September 2024, the app announced it would start handing over users' IP addresses and phone numbers to authorities who presented valid court orders, a policy it had refused to budge on for years. In 2025, Telegram reported having taken down over 34 million groups and channels for illegal content. Durov wrote on his personal channel, "Claims that Telegram is an anarchic haven are completely false. We remove millions of harmful posts and channels every day." But in February 2026, new pressure came from Russia. The FSB opened a criminal case against Durov for assistance in terrorist activities, arguing that Telegram had facilitated the Crocus City Hall attack in March 2024, which killed 145 people, and other attacks on Russian soil. Durov responded from Dubai, where he lives. "They are trying to fabricate pretexts to ban Telegram. They seek to suppress the right to privacy and freedom of expression. It is the sad spectacle of a state that is afraid of its own people." Today, Pavel Durov lives in the United Arab Emirates, holding French, Russian, Emirati, and St. Kitts and Nevis citizenship. He is banned from leaving France due to the ongoing investigation there. He faces criminal charges in Russia that he can't address without setting foot on Russian soil. And he runs a platform of nearly 1 billion users from a legal position that no lawyer in the world would envy. Telegram, meanwhile, keeps growing. It's still the tool of choice for dissidents in Belarus, still the communication channel for journalists in war zones, and still, in its darkest corners, the drug market, the extremist forum, the terrorist recruitment channel that authorities around the world have been trying to get a handle on for years. That's the paradox of Telegram. And in a way, it's the paradox of the internet itself. The same tools that protect the persecuted also protect the persecutors. The same encryption that shields an activist in Iran also shields a trafficker in Moscow. The same absence of moderation that preserves free speech also preserves hate, abuse, and crime. There's no version of Telegram that only works for the good guys, and Durov knows that. And for years he chose not to solve that problem, because solving it meant doing exactly what he had fled Russia to avoid, becoming a tool of the state. Now he's a tool for everyone, and that turns out to be almost just as complicated. That was Russia, Volume 2. An Instagram influencer found in a suitcase, the victim of a man who believed money entitled him to something he never had. The largest digital black market in history built on cryptocurrency and delivery guys hiding packages like spies. And the man who created the app that promised total freedom and who today faces charges in 2 countries for what that freedom allowed. What country should I cover in the next video? A brand new one? Or do you want me to do a volume 2 of another country we've already covered? Let me know in the comments. See you next time.